I'd like to honor our guest here today. Martin Gibbons is here. We are recording so that, and I'm sure people are going to pop in as they come. Margie is probably drinking her coffee up in Alaska. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. She reminded, oh, there she is. There she is.
I'm not in Alaska. I'm in Hawaii.
In Hawaii. Okay. She was telling me she was going to be there in her bathrobe this morning, but it looks like she's got the beach behind her. Okay. So I'm glad that she made it here, and I've got both our guests are here, Anita and Martin, and I'm going to both of them I earlier mentioned to you. I'm Joan Smith. I chair the Natural Resources Committee for the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County, Martin, and this is our clan that is beginning to gather. But you know, we sometimes on Friday mornings, we don't get quite as many. We have like 45 people. So when we record, they can take advantage of this later, and we can share that. And I'll stop the recording probably after you and Anita have your talk, because the rest of it will be just our business part of our meeting. The background that when I read your story of being the son of a woman who belonged to the League for 50 years, I was quite impressed, Martin. And
she not only was a member, she was, you know, a state leader and a local league leader for most of those years, because you know how it goes, don't you, Joan?
Yeah, exactly. And I thought that was just a wonderful aside about your wonderful life of giving. And you know, from engineer to advocating for climate change issues and mitigations, it's been a huge life of commitment that you have followed in, Martin. I also like the fact that you are kind of this new guy who took the Evergreen Ferry and is redoing it as a solar. You kind of do that with gliding and sky, what is it called? Sky flying or sky
soaring. We call it soaring.
Sky soaring. Trying to bring that into a more solar friendly era. I don't know if you heard about the Evergreen State Ferry that this man is transforming into an all electric entity, solar powered. I thought that was a wonderful article and very hopeful when we have people willing to take risks like that and to really commit to making a change. So, but Martin has been our lobby advocate for climate change issues during this short legislative session. And I'm sure he's got plenty to add and to tell, and also to forecast for us going into the future. Anita, I didn't mean to shortchange you, Anita, but I didn't get all the background information on you that I would love to have had, other than the fact that you sprained your ankle this morning rushing to your computer. The background that I know of you is you have committed to this Climate Radar newsletter and editing it, and are quick to ask for articles from people to add to it so that we can all enjoy new information and updating. And it's a wonderful vehicle. Things that tie us together are welcome in League. And this is one of those avenues. And thank you for manning that or womaning that as we go forward. And with that said, Anita, I don't know, do you need to also be a co-host? Are you planning to screen share a little bit? I know
yes.
Martin is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me
and Joan,
do that.
Joe,
Yes.
before you do that, everybody can screen share right now. You've enabled screen share for everybody, so we don't need to be co-host.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Is that,
co-host just enables us to throw people off, but, oh, well, I guess you made me co-host. Maybe that's not true. You can, here, I'm gonna allow all participants to screen share, so Anita can screen share now.
Okay.
okay, oh, well, I just made her a co-host too.
Okay,
So
well,
I think
maybe so.
we're
All
good. I
right,
think we're
that's
definitely
fine.
good on this.
It works,
And
yep,
you're gonna have to tell me how to do that at some point here.
okay.
So, with that said, though, if we all put ourselves on speaker view, we can allow Martin to have the platform he needs to really share with us here. So,
Well, what I'd like to do actually is have Anita go first, because as you said, the climate radar is a really cool thing that she started. It was her vision, and it enables us to communicate across the state, what's going on. And I'd like her to opportunity to encourage everybody to take a role in that. And it just shows that everybody can do something here, even if it seems small, we can all do something. So why don't, Anita, if you're ready, you could share your screen and do whatever.
Okay. This all started in October, and I was impressed. Just a second. I was impressed with what Marty was doing, and so I thought, the other thing is that my group, we had started a climate committee last spring, and I am co-chairing. I'm co-chairing a new climate committee that we started last spring, and we'd have speakers who were really good, and hardly anybody came. And so I wanted to I wanted to create a vehicle so that we wouldn't be all isolated and not communicating with each other and not sharing some of the cool things we were all doing. So Marty likes using Google Documents. So I thought, well, I've never used Google Documents much except to read on it. So I created my first newsletter with that. And so here it is what's going to look like. And we decided on, actually, it kind of fell into 4 sections. And the first one is mark your calendars, things that are time sensitive, webinars and that sort of thing. Or it can be something in your group. And then I have local articles of interest, recommendations on upcoming bill. That's where some of Marty's essays have come in, and which are great. The section 3 is archived recordings and environmental webinars. Well, this is where your archive library is. And so if you have something, a speaker that has been wonderful, send a link to me and I can put it into our archived recordings, at least for that month. And then section 4, excellent articles and resources. So I finally figured out how to make boxes in Google Docs. So I have here submission instructions that are kind of, I've revised them a little bit. They're a little bit finicky, but it's just so that there's a lot of things that go into it, and I'm not an editor by any means, except now. And so my vision was just to, if you could send me something and have it kind of uniform, then I can just plunk it into the newsletter. So, so there's different requests for fonts. It doesn't have to be, but it's just something to make it easier on me when I try to make it all cohesive. So the dates and times. So anyway, there's all the things that would be helpful. Let me see if I can get that down and not have so much stuff. Yeah. So subject. So then there's the submission instructions for upcoming interests, and that's where Marty's essays come in. Recordings and environmental webinars, and it tells you different kinds of things, and then submission instructions for excellent articles. So here, and then if you go on a little further, I put some samples in. So under the, here's a sample of something coming up, a webinar that we had back in October. So usually I just write out the day of the week. So, because a lot of times I get irritated. People say, oh, this cool thing is happening on February 26th. And I thought, okay, I have to go into my library. So if you can just put the day of the week and the date and the time, and then, a little bit about him or her who is going to do that. Then our local articles of interest. That's the section that Marty often puts things in. Recordings, there you go, a little bit about it. And then here's a sample. And then section 4, excellent articles. So having written the thesis, I'm kind of picky, but just having it uniform, underline the publication, the art, and the title, the date, and a link would be great. So that's that's kind of how it goes. And where's my? Come here. Okay, so we did that in October, and then I'm skipping to January. So there's all these different things. Science misinformation lunch that Marty let us know about, and then ta-da, the guy himself. And so we have lots and lots of different things. Some of them are local, some of them are from the this is Clean and Prosperous Washington. Then there's others that are national webinars that are very good. The National Association of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And some of them, sometimes they have Nobel laureates talking in conference. So they're really good. So this is the last one I just put out. Let me just go to the top. And again, it has the different sections and little notices and things that you guys have submitted as well. Anyway, so we have that and I made this step-by-step guide to making your voice heard in our Washington legislature. I made this document because I get lost. And after Marty had his talk, I went and kind of jumped on that and followed kind of the breadcrumbs that he provided us, and showed how, I'm just showing you what Marty showed, how you can go step by step to these places. And I use environment as the format. And then he shows you where to go and these little alert notes, why that's important. So there's a click on it and it has important information, and to register your pro and con on a bill. So that's the SIS committee sign-in, CSI page. So there's a lot of good things in that. And see, what are they? And so be sure, if you find a really good article, please send it to me and I can include it. This is kind of interesting. The lumber prices are off the rails again. Who would have thought that it would be climate change? And Biden's green agenda requires batteries, but building them is dirty business. And it talks about the problems of mining in places like Oregon and, getting onto tribal lands. So that's pretty much it. Questions I have here.
You had one question about the submission guidelines. Can you share them via email or another format?
Yes. Can I,
And another thing, anyone can save these newsletters or the other content from Google Docs. If you want to demonstrate that, go over to File in the in your pull down menu, and you can let's see, where is that? Make a copy, I think, and then you can save it to a Word document.
yeah, and then you put it under whatever project you
I
want.
think you can also save it as a Word document as well.
Mhm.
But then, Anita, you might want to just send out to these members your submission guidelines if via email.
Oh, okay, I have the wrong one up here. Submission, yeah. And so can I put that in? So I can just give everyone the link.
Yeah, you could put the link in the chat, or you could
Link.
maybe afterward just send a note back to reply all with that information. Some people are better at just reading the email than dealing with online. And then Virginia said, my link is weak. Is that your connection with the internet? Could someone say where I can find this list of articles? And Virginia, if you are probably turned your video off. If you want to send me or Anita, if you're not on the mailing list right now, if that's what you mean, if you're not on the mailing list for the climate radar, I can put you on the mailing list. Anybody else who's not on the mailing list, who wants to be on, who wants to get that email once a month, and you'll get a few more things from me as well if you're on that mailing list, because I'll get into that during my talk too.
Anita, thank you. Are there other questions for Anita? Maybe some will occur to you as we go forward with Martin as well. They do work in tandem very often. So I want to thank you very, very much, Anita, for this effort that you've put forth, because I think it's a great addition to tie things together and to keep us informed, and really appreciate that. Yeah, moving forward, Martin, I think the stage is now yours.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen if I can find the right thing to set the stage a bit. And I usually do something like this at the beginning of my presentations. Climate change, the evidence is accumulating every week or even every day. And here is our state's challenge. Transportation is the biggest challenge in greenhouse gas releases. That's really what we are trying to diminish. This is from 2018 because the data always lags a bit. But the next biggest area is buildings, and primarily heating. And of course, industry uses a lot of heat because they have very big buildings. And they also release greenhouse gases in the category known as other, just from their industrial processes. That includes agriculture, chemical manufacturing, and our waste stream handling. And both the buildings and the waste stream are prominent this session in the legislature. The electricity portion is diminishing by law. And so we are forcing our electricity providers to divest of their greenhouse gas supplied energy sources, whether that's coal, and the last coal plant is due to be retired in 2025. It resides in Montana and ships its electricity over here. but there are also some natural gas sources that are continuing. Those should be, well, by mid-decade, they should all be gone from the electricity grid. And as you know, we've got a lot of our electricity comes from dams in eastern Washington and further east. But some of those are under scrutiny on the Snake River because those in particular are blocking salmon runs. And we know what a challenge that is for our salmon populations and orca populations. But I'm going to now change my share to what I prepare every week during the session. This is part of it. Anita showed part of it, that the grid we call it, but this is the detail that goes into the grid on the bills that are in work right now. So I thought this is what this group would be most interested in hearing about. And this is, it's a short session, 60-day session. So the legislators are trying to push a lot of material through the keyhole of their process. And there are cutoff dates and such. We just passed a series of cutoff dates. So there was a lot of action last week. And they even had some all-nighters they pulled on the chamber floors debating bills, trying to get them completed before the cutoff dates. And now essentially all the bills that were introduced in the House are, if they survived, are now being considered in the Senate. All of the Senate bills introduced are, if they survived, are being considered in the House. There are some exceptions to that. And as it turns out, the legislature can suspend the rules when they see fit. They have to take a vote on that, but they can suspend the rules and have a bill stay alive, especially if it's necessary to implement the budget. In other words, if it is a big spender or returns a lot of revenue, they are allowed to keep those alive a little longer. So I highlighted, well, let's see, I'll start with this. There is one bill that just came out last week, or 10 days ago, maybe, Transportation for All. We've been working on this for a number of years, trying to get a big transportation, both revenue and spending bill. And Cynthia Stewart, one of our stellar issue chairs, does transportation as well as housing and revenue. So this will appear more on her page, but I wanted to make a plug for this because it's a big priority right now. Transportation is that big chunk of our greenhouse gas releases. This bill, part of it is just to repave roads that we are already using that have come in, and bridges that have come into disrepair, but also to put some emphasis on mass transit, we call it, or buses, rail, and such, because they are far more efficient greenhouse gas wise than the more convenient automobiles that we love to love in this country. But as you know, in some areas, especially where I live, the congestion is also an issue. So we think that the transit is a solution for that. Anyway, look for more information on this bill coming up. It had a hearing yesterday. I did not attend that hearing because Cynthia does that for us. But there's going to be a lot of emphasis on this bill in the legislature. So you may be getting some action alerts to sign in on these. And if you have subscribed to the Climate Radar and are on my distribution list, you see me pop up with maybe once a week links to sign in pro or con. I tend to focus on the pro bills because that consumes all my available time. And the opportunity to sign in on these bills, have your name and your position recorded and seen by the legislators. A lot of people are signing in right now, so it's important that everybody do that. And it does make a difference. Typically the committees at the beginning of the hearing will report how many people signed in pro, how many people signed in con on a specific bill. So that does make a difference. This is the weekly report that you will see. It's still in draft mode, but I'm showing you a preview here that will be published on Sunday. And it isn't quite finished yet, so I'm going to have to ad-lib a bit. I highlighted in red letters what seems to be important this coming week and maybe for the rest of the session. appliance efficiency standards. As you probably have heard, the federal standards went away a few years ago or were highly diminished. So it was up to states to re-engage with their appliance efficiency. Of course, that's a challenge because every state might be a little different. It's better to have a whole federal standard, but that's not always the reality we face. Anyway, in this case, it is on its way. It had a hearing in the Senate Committee on Environment, Energy, and Technology on February the 16th. It wasn't scheduled yet for a vote. I'm going to have to check on that today and get ready to publish this anyway. But look for this. Maybe look for next week an action alert asking you to sign in, and you should be able to just click a link, fill in your personal data because they want to know who you are, where you live, and whether you're pro or con on the bill. And then following a lot of bills, but once again, the red letter bills are, I think, the most significant. Besides carbon dioxide, you probably are aware that methane is actually a more powerful greenhouse gas, as much as 170 times as powerful as carbon dioxide. Now, it dissipates over time as it's broken down in the atmosphere, and it becomes water and carbon dioxide eventually. But while it's methane, it is an extremely powerful greenhouse gas. Therefore, if we can get rid of the methane in the atmosphere sooner rather than later, it will vastly help our control of greenhouse gases and global warming. Of course, it isn't up to just Washington State to do it, but we must do our part. At any rate, right now we have landfills that have a mixture of content, including organics, plastics. In particular, those break down in an anaerobic environment to make methane, and then that leaks, it finds its way to the surface and leaks into the atmosphere. The idea is for large landfills to attempt to capture that methane and either direct it into an energy use or burn it off, which is better because it isn't methane anymore. It's carbon dioxide, which is a weaker greenhouse gas. Even though it's carbon dioxide, it's a better situation for the environment to have it burn off. The best is not to make it at all. And there's another bill that I'll cover later to try to reduce organics in our landfills so less methane is created. Plastics, as it turns out, can also create the methane. And I'm reminded if there are any questions, somebody prompt me and I can try to answer the questions as we go or answer comments. Another one that is, this is one I just added on energy codes. And those are for buildings. As we build new buildings, make them less carbon fuel requirements, and also give them other features that reduce the greenhouse gas releases and conserve the energy, the green energy that we're increasingly generating. And that seems to be doing well right now. There's green hydrogen production, but I'd like to then focus again on something I just referred to a minute ago, organic materials management to reduce methane. And that is to divert as much of the organic matter, that's like yard waste or kitchen waste primarily, keep that out of our landfills. There in King County and on the Snohomish County, I think, and on the west side of the Cascades, where the population is more dense, we have better facilities for collecting that organic matter. I know we have been at our household have been sequestering that for about 20 years now, our kitchen waste and our yard waste, and that goes to the Cedar Grove composting center where it's commercially composted. They can handle also the cups and utensils that say commercially compostable, so they can handle that as well. Plastics still aren't the best thing to try to compost, but it's better than putting them in the water and letting them float out into the ocean. But so this bill is to encourage the waste facilities to divert that organic matter into a better use, such as composting. That's just one example. And it has had a hearing in the Senate Committee on Environment and Technology yesterday. I did testify on that, trying to promote it. So we may come, we could expect a vote next week. So look for my special edition asking for people to sign in pro. And one of the problems, we have a weekly cycle with the League of Women Voters of Washington on these newsletters, but the legislature moves much faster. It will pop up hearings and votes as a surprise out of our cycle. So that's why I need to send out special editions. Let's see, there was.
Marty?
Yes.
Can I also just add that once you get into the legislative sites, you can ask for to be emailed or to get a text about any kind of change on that bill.
That's right. And you need to, I think, create an account with them. But there is, and I probably don't have time to go into that. Many of you have probably seen my seminars on using the ledge.wa.gov website. And if you want me to come back, it's kind of late in the session now to make that useful, but I can also go into any amount of detail on that site, because it is one of the best websites I have ever encountered, and is considered a state of the art as far in the country for providing information to citizens and constituents on what's going on in the legislature. It's really a rich source. It may be more than most people can handle. That's why I do this research and try to digest it for you to read this way. Let me see. Here we go. As I opened with, emissions in buildings are a big area that the legislature and the environmental groups in the state now are pushing on very hard, besides the transportation. And there are a couple of bills. This is one of them on reducing greenhouse gas. I covered the other one a little earlier, but and they all have a slightly different take to them, at least. And this is to, do I have the, it's a continuation of the Clean Buildings Bill from a couple of years ago. And it is, we have some regulations on buildings over 50,000 square feet. Those are big warehouse type buildings. But this bill is to reduce that down to 20,000 square feet, and to cover also multifamily buildings, that would be apartment buildings. The challenge for apartment buildings is that typically they're built for economics. In other words, make them as cheap as possible because they want to have them affordable for people. But that means they put in lower appliance or lower efficiency appliances. They also may put in natural gas instead of a heat pump, because the natural gas furnace is cheaper on the initial purchase, but over time it's more expensive for the user. So this is to encourage those buildings to use more energy efficient appliances and building materials. And that means the renters in those buildings will benefit from that technology. Where I live in a single family house, I can also afford a heat pump. I have a heat pump, and I can afford other low energy using appliances, where a apartment renter may not be able to afford that, or can't just swap out the refrigerator for a better one, and they're at the mercy of the landlord's decisions there. So this is to enable, well, partly one of the benefits is those renters can benefit from the new technologies and the building codes that are emerging. Now that's, I think, the bills that I wanted to cover primarily. We have a growing list of bills that we supported that did not pass because one reason or another, they couldn't agree on detail. The legislators couldn't agree on details that would allow them to pass it. They had higher priority bills, and they were reaching the deadlines, the cutoff dates, and had to sideline some of the bills. And so there's a growing list here. Some disappointments. I could go into details if you want on some of these, but that's the nature of legislating in democracies. You don't always get what you want the first time, and we have to keep working on it. Now, if I can answer more questions, I can go into more detail on any of those bills. I can, if you know of a bill that I didn't cover that you were interested in and want to know, I can try to answer those questions. I can also try to answer questions that are outside of energy and climate. If you have questions on those, I might not be as good at answering that, but, or I can answer questions on the process.
I have a question.
Okay, Anita.
When testifying, whether written or verbally, do you have kind of a formula that you use to try to bring people who are potentially against spending the money or something? Do you try to package it in a way that seems like it would be beneficial to them somehow?
Yes. And, one thing I try to keep in mind is the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. And so we try to maintain, we work hard to maintain that. In fact, I am not allowed to donate to campaigns. I'm not allowed to be a member of a party while I'm doing this job. And so more to your point, Anita, I try to think about what would be more attractive to the opposition about this. This session, I've been emphasizing that it's a pay me now or pay me later. I'm emphasizing if we make this investment now, it will improve the lives of the people in Washington, and it will save money later because we won't have to mitigate. And what we're facing now is accommodations, really, not mitigations, accommodations for the climate change that has already happened. And we're seeing in Eastern Washington, especially, but even Western Washington, drying out of the climate. We're getting more rain in the winter, we're getting less rain in the summer. Aquifers are going down, which means streams are also going down. The snowpack in the mountains is diminishing earlier, even though there may be more snowpack at the peak, it's going away quicker. So we're seeing those right now. We're going to have to deal with that in agricultural changes and such. If we can work on mitigations now, it is cheaper for the future, even though it doesn't solve the next quarter's income problem for a business. It will affect the lives of our grandchildren and great-grandchildren in the state in the future and preserve the things we like about the states. That's what I talk about. It will preserve, in this case, our ability to go sport fishing and skiing and hiking and the wildfires that we're experiencing that are ruining communities and costing a lot of money. So that's what I've been emphasizing this year. Is that it's a cost savings in the long term. Make this investment, please.
Martin, I stopped your screen share so that we can look at you and have you be the focus of what we're doing here. And in order to answer questions, Sally Leiter has a question. Carol had a comment. She wants to say how much she really appreciates your being here and sharing this information with us. And I just knew it would be a key thing at this point in time too. So I'm really happy that you were able to find those skinny minutes to come. Sally Leiter asked, why did the Republicans in the House oppose 1663?
Okay, now let me see.
Or maybe I should ask it.
Help me out.
What were the objections in the House to 1663?
It is usually cost is what the Republicans will object to. Also, local control, that is another value that they hold, that a statewide mandate is counter to their values. And so that's what they typically objected to. And well, I just say we have to do these things. Progress usually makes life better for everybody. We have to make investments in investments in renewal and doing the right thing. You know, 100 years ago, we had coal-fired locomotives carrying our goods around the country. That would no longer be welcome. And so we have to move on. And so this is another thing. Of course, we can do better by diverting the organics away from the landfills, but many of the landfills are full and they're sitting there, you know, they're covered now, they're not being added to, but they're emitting methane and will for a long time. Let's try to capture that because methane is very bad. But you know, it's going to be a cost either to the state or to the landfill owners. And that's what they object to.
One of the, have we targeted a lot of the collection agencies, the garbage collections agencies in terms of trying to make the change? I know recently, I think it was within the last 3 years, Waste Management Northwest in our area began to collect food scraps in the green barrels, along with the grasses and twigs and things of that nature. Are there other, you know, garbage collection agencies that have been brought to the table on all of this?
Well, yeah, and I think my perception there is King County's been doing that for quite a while, because we've been doing that for quite a while, probably 15 years, putting kitchen scraps in with the yard waste. And so it is, I think, more problematic, the less populated areas, the less populated districts, because they just don't have the infrastructure to do that. You got to drive the trucks farther. Perhaps the homeowners live on a bigger property and doing their own composting maybe, or they just is inconvenient and, you know, for a sparsely populated area. So, but we must address this, and because it is creating methane, and you know, it's in some cases the question, what do the Republicans object to, or the conservatives, is unfunded mandates, you know, is one objection. But I think it is possible to do this. It just may be a little more costly for some areas, and we got to make this work one way or another. And in my personal feeling is we have to pay as we go in our living styles here. We can't push off unfunded costs to our future generations for our convenience now. And that's a value I have. Larry Harper has a question.
Hi, I'm new to group, so please excuse me if this is something you've already covered in the past. My understanding is that the recycling business in Everett is not able to find an outlet for plastics recycling, and that perhaps they're dumping plastics rather than actually recycling them, even though we're putting them in the bins. Do you know anything about that, or whether there's been a change or something is pending?
I know something about that. At least I think I know something about that. And we work with one of our coalition partners is Zero Waste Washington, who knows a lot about that. So if you go to your browser and type Zero Waste Washington, you can get a lot of information on how that's going. Plastics are a big problem. The information I have is that the recycling of plastics was really spearheaded by the plastics industry as a greenwashing technique on their product. And they wanted to make it appear that plastics was not so bad. And plastics is a huge value to our economy. into our culture, but nevertheless, it's creating a huge problem. And so most plastic is not economically recyclable. The number ones probably are mostly, but every recycling degrades the polymers in the plastic, and you can't endlessly recycle this. And so they make usually lower value products with the recycled plastic, but plastics like number fives and number sevens and plastics that have multi-layers are virtually impossible to recycle effectively. Then our markets, we used to send things to Asia, our plastic bottles to Asia, because they had lower labor rates and could recycle it more economically. And unfortunately, we send them a lot of contaminated plastic, and the plastic is just growing, the amount, so they are refusing to accept it now. So we have to throw it away. And so that is a climate problem on both ends. They use natural gas to make plastics in a lot of cases, or petroleum products, and they leak those elements into the environment, whether it's the atmosphere or into the ground. And then the plastics that are left over on single-use plastics, like carry-out plastic bags, which we did ban last year, by the way, and throughout the state. So now you're having to get paper or multi-use plastic, or more durable plastic. Anyway, and I think it is going to be a continuing problem here, because our culture is so invested in cheap plastic containers that it's going to be hard to withdraw from that. Even compostable plastic, I think it breaks down, but it doesn't fully compost. Plastic is a real problem. What Heather Trim is the executive director of Zero Waste Washington, and she says, even though the market for recyclable plastics is weak right now, and some plastics like number fives are virtually unrecyclable, please put those in the recycle bin anyway, because it's a signal to the recycling industry and anybody who's paying attention that people want to recycle, and we must figure this out. We must deal with this.
And I have a question about that. Why don't they do a better job of screening in the recycled depositories?
Well, a screening for contamination.
Contamination.
Well,
dirt.
it's expensive, and as you can imagine, it's a commodity. What they produce, this plastic stuff, and sorting is labor intensive, because we put all the stuff in the same bin: paper, plastic, metal, tin cans, whatever. And so they have to sort it. They have automatic sorting machines that can do a pretty good job, but still, one of the problems with the thin carry-out plastic bags that we were using till about a year ago, they would clog up the sorting equipment because they're so thin and flimsy. They get wrapped around the spools and gears and such, and every couple hours somebody would have to go into the machine and unclog this stuff. And the cost, it just mounts with those kind of things. Then the fact that people were putting in unclean plastic or even unclean glass and that sort of thing, it's hard to sell stuff that isn't more pure. And then, of course, there are labels on things as well, which makes things more complicated. It's just that it's a very complicated thing. So therefore, we have the trio of reduce, reuse, recycle. Recycle is at the end. And but it's going to be hard to get free from all the plastics and the containers that we produce in our culture. And it's not our fault as individuals. We were pulled along in this current, and yet we're going to have to solve the problem. But we should not feel bad about this ourselves. As I said, there's information emerging, and has been for a decade or so, how the industry pushed to have those, what they call the chasing arrow symbols on plastics, implying that they were recyclable. but they're not. And people see that and say, oh, it's recyclable, I'll put it in the recycle bin, which you should do. But it may not really be economically recyclable.
And it reminds me
Posted
of,
in
they've just come out with letters that they found in the oil companies, the energy companies, back in 1958. They were sending, the scientists for the corporations were sending letters saying, you know, this is going to be a climate problem. And of course, they found some in 1979. And what the industries did is spun it so that it make us responsible for their.
That's right. And you remember in the 70s, there was a big push on anti-littering, and littering was a big problem.
Mhm.
But the idea was, if the people would take if individuals would take responsibility, there'd be no problem. Say nothing about the responsibility of the packaging industry.
Mhm.
And I've dug into this quite a bit too. It actually goes back at least 100 years, even before tobacco figured out the same approach
Mhm.
to denying science or all the. It's really throwing in doubt is really what they do, and they don't have to convince anybody. They just have to put in enough doubt. Most people do not have time to dig into the facts, as you talked about, Anita, the memo, the internal memos that have come to light. People don't have time to sort that out and do their own research. So we tend to throw up our hands, and that's what the idea was, to sow doubt. And it's still going on right now. It is still happening. And of course, I see it in the committee hearings or hear it in the committee hearings.
Well, thank you, Anita, for bringing all of that to light. There's an inquisitive, when we keep asking the questions, we get closer to the answers, I think is what happens, and that does happen. There were a couple of comments in the chat, one about Ridwell that collects the flimsy plastic bags and also styrofoam.
Right.
Styrofoam being one of those things that you just hate to see, and it's used as a packaging material far too often. And the other comment was that when we put the plastics come in different gradients for being able to be recycled, and when we just carelessly toss in something, it ends up not being looked on favorably by the companies that are engaged in the recycling. It discourages them. They don't have, they prefer not to take the time to pick out the bad stuff. So
that's right. And that's, I find myself conflicted as I hold a plastic tub over the recycling bin or the trash bin. What should I do?
Mhm.
My decision, my personal decision, this is just me. If it's going to take me a lot of effort and energy and detergent maybe to clean out a plastic bin that I know is not recyclable, I will probably put it in the trash. If it's already nice and clean, I probably put it in the bin. Now, what Julie Winchell brought up, that it discourages and complicates the life of the recycling industry, that is probably true also. I should probably check with Heather Trim of Zero Waste Washington to see what the current philosophy is, because it's a philosophical battle. Do you give a signal that people want to recycle, or do you give the signal that people have been sucked in by the greenwashing and are doing things that are unproductive? That's very much a dilemma.
Martin, one of our key issues has been to remain an evergreen state. And we've been pushing very much the whole idea of preserving the urban forests, encouraging people that are property owners to add to the urban forest by planting more trees on their property. And Are there any bills? I imagine that you have to connect with the gal that's the
Forestry.
lobbyist for the forest
Yeah.
industry. That would be Sherry.
Yeah.
And I probably will try to get her to come next month and talk to us more. But are there bills where you work together, or have there been any bills this
Yeah,
session?
I like that question. Most of the bills that the league deals with have some overlap. You know, as you can imagine, health, it overlaps with health. Certainly everything we do has an effect on democracy, you know, our participation. And forests, there was a bill, I think last year or the year before, to encourage urban forests. I think Snohomish was pushing for that, weren't they? The Snohomish League was really behind that. And so I think that passed. I'm not sure how effective it is. I don't, you know, what we're also learning, and Sherry in particular is Sherry Dysart from the Mason County League. She's also the chair of their climate committee over there. And but she believes, and there's a lot of evidence, that a old growth forest in particular, a long-standing ancient forest, is a much better sequestration system for carbon than frequent harvesting of a industrial forest, which the wood doesn't stay wood all that long and eventually returns to the carbon dioxide. It breaks down, and it's much more complicated than what I just talked about. But there are schemes. This is another, you know, a similar approach from the plastic industry, from the petroleum industry, from the tobacco industry, to minimize the impact and actually turn it on its head. So the scientific evidence is that a long-standing forest is a much better sequester of carbon. And of course, it has other benefits for biodiversity, wildlife, and such things, and just the enjoyment of keeping the state evergreen. But that's going to be another challenge, because the forestry industry is such an important part of our economy in Washington. And if we constrain lumber harvesting, it's going to increase housing prices, and the interactions are very complicated, and sorting out the value is very complicated.
One question that came in the chat, back to the plastics issue, was what if there have been any steps to kind of make manufacturers responsible for excessive plastic, in some way of taxing them, and you know, it's evident in the packaging that we consume, you know, we buy and use and so forth. It's become such a, as you were talking to us before about, it's become such a trademark of how we do business in America, right? So,
well, as you can imagine, there's implementing a new tax or a fee is very difficult. And we tried 3 times on a carbon tax, crafting it in various ways. But there is some efforts, I think it's more at the federal level, to keep manufacturers, tag manufacturers with the recycling and taking back their products. And I think that's a great idea. And, you know, auto batteries are one example of that, where I think it is, I'm not really sure, I think it is the law to do that. And therefore it's being done. Of course, those batteries have lead in them, which that's problematic from both sides. So I think that is definitely what we should be doing, but it's tough to add a tax onto products. And keep trying. And you know, and it's better for these kind of things to be done at the federal level, actually. But if the federal level refuses to do anything, it's up to the states to try to do something. Then, of course, when the states implement a tax that another neighboring state doesn't have, it puts the internal economy at a somewhat disadvantage, at least on that issue. So the complexities are legion in getting this stuff done.
Which is why a lot of the corporations want to disseminate federal rules, because the more chaotic we are, the more fragmented are, the more power they have.
Yeah, but their lives are also more complicated, and they're having to have
That's true.
label products according to state. They don't want to do that. Unfortunately, what they tend to say is they object to Washington laws or Washington bills that try to enforce things. Then they also object when they try to do it at the federal level, and sometimes it isn't necessarily industry, but people turn the thing on its head. This is a local issue. And then when it becomes a local issue, no, it would be better to handle this at the federal level. And so they find ways to object at every level. Now, what was I going to say? We did have a couple of bills that died that would fix some of this. Then I'll go back to Anita if there's time. The right to repair, which means it opened up more of the, especially high value devices we have, such as cell phones, to not have to send my iPhone back to Apple to have it repaired. I can have a certified shop in Carnation where I live fix it if he was capable, if that place was capable. And in fact, I had my cell phone, my iPhone, had a battery replaced for $60 a couple of weeks ago. That, boy, did it perk up. And whereas my alternative was buy a new iPhone 13 for $1,100. So I was happy to do that myself. So that bill did not make it through. I think it was more, they had higher priority bills to get through, and they had cutoffs they were facing and long debates. The other one was battery recycling. It's a similar thing to get, the manufacturers of batteries to take back their batteries when they no longer were of value and extract the high value elements and chemicals out of those batteries and reuse them. And of course, it typically, when we take resources out, national resources, the resources that really belong to everybody, take them out, make cheap products. It's easier to throw them away than to, recycle.
Martin, I want to mention to you and Anita, I promised you a half an hour to 45 minutes, and we've already been a good hour. And I don't want to, I know your time is precious, and I just wanted to honor that and ask if there's, Anita's had her hand up for something to add. So I want to be,
and I want to
here and let you know that we have greatly appreciated this. And would you be willing to come back maybe later in the year and get us focused again? This has been so inspiring, and I think people have just really thoroughly enjoyed your presentations. And Anita, I hope we'll start. I have one article on the forest that I think I'm going to send to you that to put into your that was in our local paper, the Herald, about the importance of the keeping our urban forests going and so forth. So, but in the meantime, you had one other question to add or something to put forth.
Well, a couple things. One, I read a book long ago by a guy named Marty, who's a lawyer for environmental concerns in Missoula. And it was how to get what you want every time. And I thought, what an awful book. And, but it was, as a lawyer, you have to think through the other side's brains. And that really stuck with me, not enough, but to really try to get into what is igniting them? Is it the money? Is it their base? You know, whoever. And then the thing when I was in Mexico City, changing direction here, I saw the dump trucks. Not the dump, the garbage trucks had about 6 people, and they would sort through the garbage and only pick out the good stuff to put in their recycle. And I thought, well, that's an interesting, you know, out of the box kind of a way. The other thing that I was going to say is that when I came up here, it must have been the late 80s, there was a bottle bill. And it was when we didn't use the internet, but the bottling companies put in these full-page ads of what it was like in Oregon. Well, I just came from Oregon, and they had pictures of mountains of garbage and recycling in Safeways, and it was just complete bogus. I don't know where it was photoshopped before their time, you know, it was all lies. And because they want to get out of it, and the kind of lies have been around for a long time to avoid doing the right thing. And I don't know how, you know, when you have huge money behind you, and I've been looking at some of our local people and where the money comes from, it's pretty dark and huge bags of money.
But Anita, it takes people like that are in this committee and like yourself that keep gnawing away. And it's that whole idea. You can break that stranglehold of rope by snipping at one little thread at a time. And I see that going on. And Martin, I'm going to give you the last word here.
Yes.
Thank you.
As you part.
And what I wanted to say is we can all make a difference here. And of course, I'm speaking to people who really want to make a difference, who have some time to make a difference. One of the easy things to do is to respond to the action alerts that come out every week. And also to my special, if you're on the distribution list, to my special requests, because even signing in pro to these bills, even though there may be 1,000 people signing in, it's still important to do that. And the other thing is we've got a lot of good ideas in the chat here, and in particular, how do we deal with the recycled plastic? And we have to rethink that continuously, really. And so one thing somebody could do is find a good analysis of which way to go, when to go one way or another, write a paragraph summary of what's in there, send the link to Anita, and she will put it in the climate radar. That's one thing you can do. I would ask you to be very judicious, to put in sources that are reliable, and also that have specific information that you believe is true. And then let's pass that good information around, and please, you know, make a short summary, at least 3 or 4 sentences, so people can get an idea of what's in that article and if it's of value to them. So we can all make a difference here. We can all move towards a better future.
Thank you for that research. Go fight, win. And there are people here who are definitely have the good minds to try to track down that type of information. Martin and Anita, thank you so much. Please do come back.